created walls 10 feet, 20 feet deep. We're so grateful that you just removed them instantaneously. That if there's any doubt of your power, that has already been removed. We ask you to keep us focused for the short time we're here tonight. Not think about the room and the circumstances and whether it's hot or whether it's cold, Lord, but think about the gratitude. Think about how we humbly came to this podium and how we humbly came to this room. We thank you for the steps. We thank you for the 12-step house. We thank you for this specific group who boldly have speakers come here for the last 30 years. And we pray all these things in your name. Amen. Hi, everybody. I'm Stevie B, and I'm a recovering alcoholic and a member of the West Side Men's Group. Nice. And I'm going to say how grateful I am about my 9-year medallion, but, I just have to tell you something that I was laying in bed yesterday, and I had food poisoning, and it was horrific. And if you don't know anything about humility, if you don't know anything about a humbling experience, when your body doesn't do what you're asking it to do, when your body is retching, sober now. I'm not talking about when we're using. When we're using, we have some type of cushion, between reality and throwing up. But when you're sober, and you didn't do anything wrong to attain throwing up, and you're doing it violently, and you just can't stop, and you want to stop, but you can't stop, and your body, you're not in control of your bodily functions. And everything in you is just hurting, and you don't know if you're going to make it through. And if you're like me, you're over dramatic. It feels like the last moment here on planet Earth. I was already asking the Lord to watch over Sandy, and as I was approaching the pearly gates, and then this morning when I was laying in bed with 102 temperature, and then to know that Cheryl was going to be picking up her one-year medallion tonight, a person that's become so important to me and my wife, to the Recovery Bible Study, to the people in the recovery community, to the St. Francis community down here, an inspiration to us. That I was laying in bed and I was saying, there's no way I'm going to get to do the steps tonight. There's no way. And then thinking that she was going to be receiving her medallion tonight, I knew there was no way that I couldn't do the steps tonight. Because with all my thumb-sucking crybaby, 102 temperature, here's someone that through thick and thin gets here to meetings and knows that her primary purpose is to help a sick and suffering alcoholic. And I'm not, if you don't feel emotion after seeing her pick up her medallion, if you don't have emotion going through you right now, you got to ask yourself, you got to do a spiritual MRI and say, why am I dead inside? And if you're spiritually dead right now and you don't feel what I'm feeling, don't worry. As you're in the 12 steps, as God starts to unveil himself to you, as the wreckage of your past starts to get cleared away, as the sunlight of the Spirit starts to come through the windows of your heart, you're going to feel these things where I'm not even embarrassed to weep at another person's medallion. Because God has done for me and for Cheryl and for Eddie and for Rachel something that we could never have done on our own. Never in a million years have done it on our own. I don't understand how people have a problem believing in God when you look around this room. Now, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous believes in a God as you understand him, and I'm certainly not going to say that you need to believe in God as I understand him, but find out how you believe in God as you understand him. Don't be so ridiculous to think that we created this. We can't even keep the air conditioning on. So God could and would if he were sought. And I'm saying if it's your first night hearing me already, if it's your first night hearing me, understand it's going to seem overwhelming. It's not going to be natural. You're not going to be like, oh, I love that guy. Most people the first night hearing me, give yourself credit that you didn't already run out. Give yourself a lot of credit. Because it takes time. It's like, one guy is running out. It's like an acquired taste. It's an acquired taste. It's not something you don't eat tuna fish the first time and go, wow, this is unbelievable. It takes time. One of my sponsees that's here, Michael, behind me, he walked out the first 2 times he heard me in my last step series here. He walked out, they went home, they character assassinated me, they said, who does that guy think he is? And who does he think, what did he rewrite the big book? And then he came back and he walked out again and he was throwing me the bird outside the meeting and then he came back. Because if you're just going to meetings where they're talking about staying sober, just staying sober, if that's all anyone's saying is, at least I stayed sober, if that's the whole thing you came in here for, if you're like me, you're going to eventually leave anyway, and I did. Because I have to have as much joy and as much enthusiasm and as much pizzazz inside AA as I did when I was using. Like, there's got to be something exciting in here for me to be giving up my nights. And let me say this, Ray, I want you to listen to me on this. If the only thing you come in here for is to get back or get for the first time your wife, your job, your car, your finances, if the only thing you come in here for is that, you will get that back, probably. But then as soon as you get it back, you will leave. Because then you'll be sitting inside Alcoholics Anonymous 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years and saying, is that all there is? Yes, for you there was that all there is. But for the rest of us, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, as the result of these steps, we stay because there's so much more than getting back the God, the car, the girl, the job, the finances. We come back for the nights to see you pick up your 1-year medallion. That is what motivated me, and my wife will tell you, I'm not being dramatic, that motivated me this morning. When I was in bed, I said, there's no way it's going to be able to happen. And then I knew there was no way it wasn't going to happen. Because I believe in a God that believes in me. Now, it took me a long time to say that. I didn't believe that. I always believed in God. My parents grew me up. Grew me up? I work in the Fort Lauderdale swap shop, so cut me some slack. Where you stay, I'm staying over here. My parents raised me to believe in God. And I believed that God believed in my parents. I believed that God had cared about countries. I believed that God cared about the big things. But I never, ever, ever thought that God had anything to do with me. And especially with all my defects of character all walled up inside me, mostly lust, mostly pride, mostly anger. The top 3 for me. Anger, pride, and lust. And if you take a look at your life, you're going to see that you have a top 3 also. Most men are going to have the top 3. I'm not sure if women have lust like that. I don't know. You got to see what yours is. Tonight we're going to be talking about how we can ask God to remove from us the things that are separating us from Him and also keeping us miserable inside of AA. Because if you're coming to AA and you're miserable, why are you coming to AA? You're missing the point. You could stay sober through a 1-step program, give your life to God, go to church, and stay sober forever. That's not our deal. Our deal takes a 12-step approach to getting well. And if you're not doing the 12 steps, you're trying to do it too hard on your own. God gave us the 12 steps for a reason. He actually invented the program in the 1930s. It wasn't 2 men, one was a proctologist and one was a stockbroker, that invented a program that stood the test of time for the last 70 years. That nobody even is able to dispute the first 164 pages. There's no reason to dispute it because millions of people are recovering right now from alcoholism because of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps. Nobody can dispute it. They dispute a lot of other things in the big book, but they can't dispute the first 164 pages. Now, if a million people go out and use tomorrow, there'll be a lot of disputing. But until that time happens, there's no disputing that the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the 12 steps work. So guess what? We don't need to rewrite anything. But we need to get in places where they're taking this thing seriously because people are dying out there. Cheryl spoke about a young lady that died on the train tracks last week. You know that we had a young man, is Mike here? I thought I saw Mike. A young man here that blew his brains out on January 1st. A young, promising, good-looking, tall guy, a guy that looks like he has everything going from the outside and dying spiritually on the inside. Now, where are we at in the 12 steps? We're at a place that gets looked over in most groups. A place that gets skimmed over. A place that we talk about 4 and 5 like it's the holy grail of AA. Even Cheryl came up today and she talked about how incredible 4 and 5 was. And it is. And then next thing you know, we're in our meetings and people are talking about 8 and 9. somehow we're forgetting to talk about where the most important part of the program, George, is in 6 and 7. And if you don't find out that 6 and 7 is the most important part of the program, you're going to be sitting miserably inside your own sobriety. It's 15 years, 12 years, 10 years, 22 years, and wondering why you want to take a gun to your head. Because your life will be all backed up with defects of character. Now let me just say this. I don't want to say what happens to you. Let me say what happened to me. I'm 5 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I do some type of half fifth step that's like, quasi fifth step, which means I tell the other person almost everything and I keep all the juicy stuff to myself. And then I do like a 6 and 7. What I mean by I do a 6 and 7 from the big book. I take the book off the shelf. What's in the big book? You take the book off the shelf. Everybody laughed at that. You take the book off the shelf and you see where you might have skimped on some of the steps. You look over 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It says look at the first 5 proposals, which is the 5 steps. And you see where you might have skimped on the first 5 steps. Skimp means you didn't do enough work in it. I looked at my steps. They looked fine. I knew that I wanted to give God my alcoholism. I know that when I get down on my knees in the morning, I ask Him to take my drug addiction and my alcoholism. I know that when I get down on my knees at night, I thank Him for taking my drug addiction and my alcoholism. But everything else in the middle, I wanted to keep. I wanted to keep my lust. I wanted to keep my anger. And believe me, I was keeping my anger. I wanted to keep my rage, what has to do with anger. We're going to talk about padules. Pride, anger, greed, gluttony, envy, lust, and sloth. The padules. The 7 deadly defects of character. And then like my friend Richard Spikes likes to say, then there's subcategories and subcategories. But they all fall under those categories. Each one of the things that you're suffering from right now, that's going through your mind, can fall under those 7 defects of character or the 7 deadly sins. Pride, anger, greed, gluttony, envy, lust, and sloth. If you don't know what sloth is, look it up, but you probably won't because it means you're lazy. So I just told you what it was. And those are the 7 defects of character, the 7 deadly sins that separate you from God, and me from Eddie, and me from my wife, and you from your brothers. And when Jimmy from your home group tells you something, you can't see it because you have pride. And instead of having your pride lowered down so that when a brother tells you that you have horns coming out and you say thank you, you say, who are you to say it to me? And when you do that, like I did in my 5th year of sobriety, by the time your 7th year of sobriety comes, you drink. Because for me, to drink was better than to kill myself. And I was going to do one of the two because I was restless, irritable, and discontent inside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And believe me, you can get that way. If the only thing you come in for is to get your things back, after you do, or while you're trying to attain it, you will want to kill yourself. And for some of us, money becomes our God. And for some of us, sex becomes our God. And for some of us, people-pleasing becomes our God. And we put all these gods in the place of what the God-sized hole needs to be filled up, which is big G God. And we fill it up with all little g God. My friend, 2 times I'm quoting him tonight, Joe, but he said instead of Bill W., he's following Bill Gates. When you have God as your money, you'll follow that down that path. Myself, I had rage, lust, and pride. And I never wanted you to see it, so I put out a persona of people-pleasing. Ooh, that's like a perfect package. I was nice to you and wanted to kill you at the same time. I was like, how you doing? You look great. I hate your guts. And it was like a bipolar thing going on. And when you have that thing going on, guess what happens? One day you forget exactly which personality's out and you bleed all over yourself and inside the meetings. And people don't want to have anything to do with you. And if you're a guy, if you're a big guy, and they just leave you alone. No one's going to take a chance on you when they have a lot of other things they got to take a chance on. Not in this day and age. There was a time in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous where it talks about we did 12-step work. We go into people's homes. We let them live in our homes. We gave them our spare bedrooms. That's not happening in these day and ages because it's a different era. Okay, I'm not saying that people don't go out of their way. Of course they do, but you can't do as much as you would do in the old days, so people aren't going to take chances on you if you're a personality defect looking for character. That's right, it hurt right there. Some of you guys, whoo. That's an ouch, exactly. So in the 7th step, in the 6th and 7th step, in the 6th step, we become entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. We're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. But in the seventh step, which is where we're at tonight,